No true successful long-term weight loss journey is linear. It's a journey that includes strengthening skills of weight management for sure, but way more importantly than anyone is willing to admit, it is an inner journey of self-belief and self-communication. It is one of the most courageous and life-affirming journeys that you can embark upon. This month, as I explore this month's theme of this journey of weight mastery, I interviewed Lisa, who has been on her weight mastery journey for a year. Lisa shares the highs and lows and amazing insights from her journey of releasing 40 pounds and will give you a taste of what the inner journey of embarking upon a long-term weight release journey is about. So come get motivated and inspired in episode 58 of the Thin Thinking podcast. Did you know that our struggle with weight doesn't start with the food on your plate or get fixed in the gym? 80% of our weight struggle is mental. That's right. The key to unlocking long-term weight release and management begins in your mind. Hi there, I'm Rita Black. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, weight loss expert, best-selling author, and the creator of the Shift Weight Mastery process. And not only have I helped thousands of people over the past 20 years achieve long-term weight mastery, I am also a former weight struggler, carb addict, and binge eater. And after 2 decades of failed diets and fad weight loss programs, I lost 40 pounds with the help of hypnosis. Not only did I release all that weight, I have kept it off for 25 years. Enter the Thin Thinking podcast, where you too will learn how to remove the mental roadblocks that keep you struggling. I'll give you the thin thinking tools, skills, and insights to help you develop the mindset you need, not only to achieve your ideal weight, but to stay there long term and live your best life. Sound good? Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. So I have been composting. What does that have to do with anything, Rita? Well, I want to tell you, and I'm not trying to what is it when you, something signal, righteous signal, something where you signaling like you're a good person or a good human being. I'm not doing that at all. So, but I am really excited about this skill that I have learned, that I really came from a place of pain, because many years ago I tried to compost. And my compost pile, I had one of those little compost machines, and I would put in everything in these like big chunks of like pineapple and banana peels and all this stuff. And it just ended up being like this big gloopy pile of garbage, basically, that then rats and mice and all these animals came and found, and it was just a hot mess. So I had a friend of mine, my gardening coach, I guess I would say, my good friend Mary. She was like, Rita, this is how you compost. You don't do that. You have to break things down a little bit, but you also have to layer. You have to layer real dirt. She's like, it's like a lasagna. Now, the moment she said lasagna, then my ears perked up because it was food, right? But no, she was like, you do a layer of dirt, then you do a layer of your matter that you're trying to break down, and then maybe you put a layer of the not the mulch, the like fertilizer, like manure or something like that. And then you do it again, and then you cover it up, and you let the heat and break it down. And so I've been doing this lasagna of compost, and it's miraculous, because then I'll go and I'll work it around, and I put coffee grounds out there, and I break down all the weeds and leaves from my garden. I have this little compost thing that like a shredder that shreds them all. I don't really put fruit peels or anything in there anymore, but I'll put eggshells in and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but I'm so thrilled because I've made this amazing compost that smells a little like coffee, and I've been putting it in my garden, and just the cycle of life. I mean, I'm so, it's spring and I'm out in my garden, and man, I'm just inspired by that. I don't know why I'm so weird, but anyway, that is, it's helping make my flowers prettier. I'm convinced, but I'm just so in love with this skill I've learned, I guess. And that's why I'm, here like trying to inspire you guys with this idea of really building the skills of weight management. So just as I have learned that there are so many phases and layers of truly cultivating a garden. I never set out to be a gardener, but that is what is required in a way if you want to have the garden of your dreams. And I feel like my garden is turning into my garden of my dreams slowly but surely. I do kill things along the way, but it's evolving. So, and I could, I guess, pay somebody, but I don't have that kind of money to come and have somebody make it for me. So, but the same is really true of really releasing weight for good. There are phases and layers that often we bark upon weight loss, and we get to a phase or a layer and we think, oh crap, I blew it. And we go back to the beginning and we start over. But no, 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 no. That is the time to truly keep going. Now, in last episode, I really talked about this long-term journey, and I broke it down and I talked about phases. So if you like, you can go back and listen to that. But this month, I'm really looking at the long-term journey and really what it's required from the inside out. And so that is why I'm excited to invite you to my masterclass on April 21st called How to Stop the Start Over Tomorrow Weight Struggle Cycle and Start Releasing Weight for Good. In this free masterclass, you're going to learn the 3 most common weight loss mistakes that keep you feeling stuck and struggling. And you're also going to get the mental shifts that you can make to remove the subconscious resistance and roadblocks, and a 4-part shift process that has helped thousands of people lose weight long term by using mind power over willpower. So, and also don't forget, we're going to be doing some hypnosis. So check it out. It's in the show notes. Go sign up because the seating is limited and we're already getting pretty full. So, it's in the show notes, and yeah, it's only a couple of days away. So if you're listening to this and it's after April 21st, 2022, don't go look for it anymore. It's not there. There's probably something in the show notes I've put in its place to, compensate you. But yeah, go check out the show notes anyway. There'll be something fun there for you. But those of you prior to April 21st, 21, get in there and sign up because this is going to be fun. So yes, I am sharing my conversation with you guys that I did with Lisa, who did the Shift Weight Mastery process about this time last year. So we do have a Shift Weight Mastery process coming up as well. And she began her journey of weight mastery in April. And this conversation, I hope, will illuminate the point that I'm trying to make about true success coming from creating a journey that you own. And Lisa has really done that. There's some fascinating points that she makes, and she's very soulful in this. So I hope you enjoy. So let's hop into the interview. Hello, Lisa. Welcome to Thin Thinking. I'm so glad you were able to give us your time. I'm so excited because this week or this month, I should say, is all about like exploring the weight mastery journey. And you've been on such a great and interesting weight mastery journey that we can all learn from.
Thank you, Rita. It's great to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me to be on the podcast.
Oh, well, I'm so excited. So I think for our listeners, I would love for you just to kind of walk us through what your like your history with weight. Like, when did you feel like you started struggling with weight, and kind of just walk us through that, like what happened?
Sure. So I was a really skinny kid to the point that people would make fun of me a little bit for being so scrawny. And I
Wow.
was the youngest. I am the youngest of 5 kids. in a family that was really kind of we were in kind of a competitive eating environment. So I had a hard time keeping up because I naturally couldn't eat a lot of food, and I was smaller than everybody else. So I remember like trying to drink soda pop and being really uncomfortable. And so that was really my starting point, was the kid that was actually kind of in tune with hunger. And then we really had very little structure about food in my family. You could eat whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted. There were, the kitchen was always open, and,
Oh, interesting.
yeah. So I didn't really grow up learning about boundaries with food.
Did you
My
guys eat
mom,
meals? I mean, did you guys sit down at mealtime and then you could then just snack freely whenever you wanted it? Was that what you were saying?
yes, we almost always ate dinner together as a family. But if you
Okay.
didn't like what my mom made, she's like, go make yourself a sandwich. I don't care. Like it was just very relaxed. So there was a lot of good things about that. But I think
Yeah.
that I didn't really learn, you know, later how to moderate my food intake, or that you need to moderate your food intake, because it was kind of a free for all.
Mm.
And my mom always struggled with her weight. So I watched her, go through the diets and the little candies, appetite suppressants. And, I
Oh
watched her
my
struggle
God,
a
Lisa,
lot.
I just have to say the appetite suppressant candies. I totally forgot about those. What were I remember those chewy things that you would eat. My mom had
Yeah.
those too. Oh,
Little chocolate square thing, I think, in
yes,
a
I
box.
I
Yeah.
love those. So
Yeah.
you're
I
just
ate them too.
you're totally taking me down memory lane with this. Okay. So yeah, the mom and the chewy appetite suppressant things. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no, it's
So
fine.
she struggled though. So was she struggling a lot? Like, would she go on a diet and then go off a diet, or was she?
Yeah. She did Weight Watchers. And I remember like my brother and I would go eat our lunch in the garage, because it was back when you had to eat liver for lunch,
Yes.
2 days a week or something. And the smell was disgusting. And she really put herself through a lot, and she just really struggled with it. And I think a lot of it was also emotional eating. My mom lost her father at a very young age and really
Mm.
had to raise herself. And I don't think that she ever really got the support that she needed as a kid. So she kind of had to learn to be her own parent and cope with grief, without
Mm.
in not in a healthy way. And so
Right.
and so she just never got that kind of support. And I think people understand a lot more about what kids need when they go through a loss like that. But this was the 50s, and
Yeah.
it just was a
No.
different environment.
Mhm.
So in terms of, I probably did learn a lot of my later eating habits from my mom. And but my weight issues for myself really started more during adolescence, and
Mhm.
just more as a result of being kind of mindless about what I was eating. And I started putting on a little weight. And then I was kind of up and down about 25 pounds for probably the next maybe 20 years or so, into my 30s, early 40s. At one
Can I
point,
ask? I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt, but can
no,
I
go
ask?
ahead.
Can I ask? Were you dieting in this time frame, or were you just? I mean, how were you trying to manage your weight in this time frame, or were you, you know?
Usually I manage my weight by exercising a lot. I've
Okay.
always liked to exercise. And so that was my go-to. I think I remember one time doing a little diet that I tore out of a magazine, that was a 1200 calorie a day. And I actually remember sticking to that for quite a while. But no, for the most part, I think I was pretty clueless that the amount of food you take in actually can result in weight gain in sort of
Right.
a weird way. I think I just was like, oh, you just have to exercise more, and that's how it works. And so I didn't have a great awareness. I really wasn't into diets much. I might try one for a little while, but I couldn't stick to anything really stringent. I don't like rules really.
Yeah.
So I just have a hard time with a rigid kind of approach to almost anything. And so I just kept trying, exercise was really my go-to. I was cycling a lot and I was burning a ton of calories, and I'm an active person. And so it worked pretty well. It didn't work great, but it worked well enough that I was, a little overweight, but not, significantly.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I hit a point where I became ill with a chronic illness, but it took about 3.5 years to get a diagnosis. And so
Oh,
the
wow.
only thing I knew was that I felt really bad, and I thought I would develop flu-like symptoms if I exercised. And so I went from cycling 50 miles to feeling sick after a short bike ride and ending up in bed for a few days. And that was a really hard time for me. It was just that, exercise is also part of how I keep my mind healthy. So
Yes.
when I can't exercise, I get really squirrely and I tend to get depressed. And so, for me, it was just like, that was exercise was key to everything in my life. And so, I couldn't exercise for a long time. I got kind of depressed because of it. And I started gaining weight. I didn't really change my eating habits to account for the fewer calories that I was burning. But I did finally get a diagnosis that's totally treatable, luckily no permanent damage. And so, I started feeling better and started exercising again. And then I had, 3 pretty serious injuries in a row. And again, because I had never developed a good set of skills for balancing my energy intake and output so that I didn't gain weight, I just started, I continued to gain weight.
Right.
And then COVID hit. And during COVID, I was dating somebody who, enjoyed dining and drank more alcohol. And at that point, my weight hit the highest it had ever hit. And that was a little over a year ago. Excuse me. And I was really getting to the point where I was distraught about it because I didn't feel like myself. I think that everybody can be comfortable at a different weight. And I think that some people are a little bit heavier, but they're comfortable and healthy,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And I can't say that I felt that way. I just felt really awkward. My knees hurt a lot. It was hard to do the things that I wanted to do. I was uncomfortable in my body, and not just looks, but also just the way I felt.
Right.
So I just knew that I had to do something, but I also knew that everything else I had tried really hadn't worked. And so, I might, like South Beach always worked pretty well for me in terms of like the food composition. And so I would get that out. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do South Beach again. And I would do it for a few days, and then I would lose focus and I'd be back to cheese and crackers at the counter.
Right.
And so I realized like, I'm not in control of this, and I need to find something else.
So how did you find the shift weight mastery process, and how did, I'll ask you that and then I'm going to ask you about hypnosis, but when you enrolled in the shift weight mastery process, were you aware of that it was a hypnosis based program? And is that what you were interested in?
I can't remember when I became aware that hypnosis was an element to it. What happened was I was in one of those, late night desperate moments, looking on Amazon or somewhere for a new diet book because I'd read like all the other diet books.
Right.
And I came across From Fat to Thin Thinking, your book.
Right.
And so I downloaded it to my Kindle and I started reading it, and it resonated so much. And I think that maybe it was just like, it just came at exactly the right time for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a coach for a period of time, maybe 15 years before, who worked with me and who said a lot of the same things, although she didn't use hypnosis or meditation, but I think she was trying to teach me a lot of the skills, but I wasn't ready to hear it. I was still in the like the mindset of a high school football player. It's like, well, I just got to practice harder and, burn off more calories, and I can maintain my eating habits. I
Right.
mean, really, I was still trying to just live in a way that I could maintain poor eating habits. And so I think when I read your book, I really had just hit such a low point that I was
Mhm.
more receptive to
Yeah.
hearing like that this is not about that you don't know what is healthy food and what is unhealthy food. It's about that you need to learn to use your mind in a different way.
Mhm.
And so I read your book. I forced myself to read it slowly rather than that overnight binge on a new diet book, and oh, I'm going to turn over a new leaf tomorrow, and
Right.
I'm going to be perfect from now on. I've cracked this thing. And I just for some reason I just was like ready to slow down. I made myself do the exercises, which I never had done before. I would read the diet book. You know how it is. You read it, you
Yeah.
get to the writing
Oh, yeah.
exercise, you're like, yeah, I don't need
Or I'll do it
to.
later.
I'll do
Let
it
me
later.
get to the magic pill and then
Ex-
I'll go
yes.
back and do
Yeah. I'm like the classic shift candidate. I just have been through I can relate to all of the things that you talk about.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I really did just like, I'm not going to binge. I'm going to read one chapter a day or less if I'm busy. And I'm going to sit down the next morning and I'm going to write out this, even if it's a 5-minute exercise, I'm going to make myself do it and think about it. And then I think I can't remember if it was through the 30-day process or through the book where you make links available for people to be able to try hypnosis,
I
some of the
yeah.
vision exercises.
Yeah, there's definitely that in the book if you go online and sign up for it. And then definitely in the shift weight mastery process, which is more robust, I think it's every day. So yeah, links
Right.
to meditation and hypnosis for sure.
Yeah. So I think I read the book and then I signed up for the 30-day at the end of the book. And I would say like one of the things that I realize is one of the exercises is where you give yourself a number of belief. Like, do you
Right.
believe you can lose weight? And then that was when I really realized like I was like 40% and I might have been a little too generous, like
Wow.
in terms of believing that I could actually lose weight. And that's when I was really starting to examine how important it is to be able to have some kind of a vision, because it had been so long since I was at the weight that I wanted to be that I really wasn't able to picture that anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
did
I
that
think
part.
if I could just interject what you're talking about, which is very wonderful, Lisa. I love how you're just going through all this so well, is that the pain of being overweight and so often we go on these diets just to get out of the pain without that vision. And so often then, we'll eat healthy for a couple of days, feel better, the pain goes away, and then we kind of forget it's so much easier to get off track unless you have a very powerful idea of where you want to go. So sorry to interrupt, but that I just want to interject that in there for our listeners.
No, I think that's really true, because when you are in that desperate moment of finding that new diet or going back to something that you did before that worked for a while, all you're thinking about is that you're miserable, you're unhappy with how you feel or how you look, and you want out of that pain, and that feels like the quickest way to do it. And you kind of trick yourself, or will pretend to yourself that you really, this time is somehow going to be different.
Yeah.
This time I really am going to be able to stick to this, even though we all know that if you're not changing anything else, you're just repeating a failing cycle over and over again, and it'll happen again. And then every time that happens, you lose faith in yourself. And
Yes.
you've talked about that a lot, is that's part of the diet mentality is, and the fat thinking is that you set yourself up to fail because you haven't really done the work you need to do. You fail, and then beat yourself up and feel terrible, and then maybe eat something to feel better. And it's an unending cycle
Yeah.
for sure.
Well said. So, so how, as you went through the process, did you find the hypnosis helpful? And had you ever done any sort of hypnosis before, Lisa?
No, I hadn't. And I was receptive to it because I knew enough to know that it wasn't like a mall hypnosis show or, like mind control kind of thing. I
Mhm.
trusted, by then I trusted you too, Rita, because I could tell who you were through reading your book and through going through the 30-day process that, there was nothing to be afraid of. And
Yeah.
so I started doing the meditation and the hypnosis, and I really, I still love it. And I have this entire library saved in my notes and on my iPhone where I download them and I categorize, is it meditation or hypnosis and what's the theme? And so I can now pull from whatever, there's always something for me is what I find. Like whatever I'm struggling with that day, there's a hypnosis or meditation that helps me kind of wrap my mind and get my head in the right place with it. But I think that it's just, I don't think I could have done this program without it. I do think that's what sets this shift aside from other maybe mindful based programs. Is I used to read about like, oh, just be mindful and just put your fork down and do those things and you'll be
Yeah.
fine. And it just has to go so much deeper than that for some of us, and certainly for me.
Well,
Um,
I think to reiterate what you said is that once you get into that repetitive cycle of starting a diet, going through it, then getting off, and that feeling the pain, the release from the pain, that becomes a habit, and that habit is subconscious. And so, like you said, for so many people, I don't think it's few, it's most that is an epidemic right now. It's like people are stuck in this. I'll start again tomorrow. I got to get out of the pain. I don't want to be where I am now, but we aren't going deep enough to really make fundamental change. And that's really what hypnosis helps with. Yeah. So,
I completely agree. I think for myself, I can say that what it has done for me is it has helped me to bring all of these unconscious beliefs and patterns and habits into the light where I
mhm,
can look at them, and I can't always fix all of them immediately. I
no,
don't want to make it sound like this is just a different magic
right.
pill,
It's,
because
yeah,
it's not. It
no,
really
it's a
is.
tool.
It's a tool, and it's one that you have to use it regularly for it to work. And sometimes you bring something out and you're just not quite ready to deal with it, which is how my journey has been. I think
Yes.
that, you start with sometimes the low hanging fruit, which is
Mhm.
sometimes it's just the basic skills. And then you might hit a point where something comes up, you hit a plateau or you hit a rough spot in your life or something happens. And then it kind of peels off. You sort of peeled off that first layer, and then you're looking at something else and you're like, okay, well now what is this? But the hypnosis always seems to help me, first of all, to identify that there's something else there. Like,
Yeah.
even if I don't know exactly what it is, I've just gotten much better now at saying, okay, hold on here. Like, what's happening? And I'll take a step back and I'll start to think about it. But I've become much more brave investigating those things. And you always encourage us to develop the inner scientist and develop our curiosity about ourselves, and instead of judging or criticizing ourselves or being rebellious. You talk about the inner rebel and the inner critic, and there's a couple ways you can go when you're having a hard time, and one of them might be the come on, have some, just do it, whatever, it'll be fun,
Yeah.
to sort of distract yourself,
Numb it out with food.
numb it out with food or alcohol, or beat yourself up because you're not being perfect. And
Right.
so I really think that the hypnosis has just the effect. It's just even hard to explain sometimes. It's very subtle and it takes some time, and it's not magic, but it does change your awareness of yourself and your awareness of what you're doing in a non-judgmental way. And
Yeah.
that for me has been key to addressing things, because now it's like, okay, you're slipping back into an old eating habit, like what that doesn't serve you. So what is that about? I'll take that step back and be like, well, I'm very stressed at work right now. I'm anxious about that, or I'm really tired and I'm not, I'm feeling hungry because really I'm tired, or whatever it is that's going on, or I'm feeling emotional about something, but I'm from the Midwest. So, where I'm from, emotions belong stuffed under the
Right.
surface. Like that's just how we roll. So I've had to learn to, you know, like just be more comfortable with that. And even
Mhm.
if it's uncomfortable, sometimes I just have to like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but it's not really quite as uncomfortable as feeling out of control does. So,
Yes.
I get there and I don't always get there immediately, but once I'm aware that there's something going on, I work at it, and I work at it at a pace that I can handle.
Yeah. And you're talking about what Lisa's talking about, everybody, is like this kind of mentality, this kind of what I talk about, your inner coach, right? Like you've really developed a new communication system within yourself that gives you the space to go through this process, to ask, to get curious, to look, to dive deeper. Because yes, every time you do that, you are going a little deeper, you're getting a little further along, and you aren't popping back into that old, like, well, let me start it over again, but you're staying on your journey, which, so I guess what I would ask next is, kind of take us through your weight release journey, because I think the what I wanted because you have gone on you've been on this journey for now a year, and I want people to really understand that a journey of weight mastery isn't just, linear. Like you're saying, be good on something, lose weight, and then, you fit into a size 6 or whatever. But that it's really a journey with yourself, and that there are so many pieces to the journey of self-discovery. Like you're saying, like first it's you get some skills and you get some weight release and you're like, oh, okay, this is going well. And then you get up against what I call struggle points, which are it's not they exist. It's not like there's something wrong with you that they exist. But I think when we are trying to lose weight and we come up against our first struggle point, it's such a disappointment. It's like, oh, it was going so well. And I thought I had the answer. It's like, yes, you do have the answer. Keep going. Don't stop, but people are like, it's like relationships. There's this imago therapy, which is very much based on a very similar thing where we meet somebody and it's like the honeymoon period, right? And you're so completing each other's sentences. And then you kind of commit a little deeper. And then it's like, who are you? I don't even know who you are. And, because you're dark, you feel a little more comfortable. So you're a little more of your dark side and their dark side comes up. And, with imago therapy, it's like, that is when the relationship begins. It's not when, but most people are like, I'm out of here. So it's very similar with our relationship with ourselves and to food. And, it's kind of like that first struggle point is where your relationship with weight mastery really begins. That's when you really start to have to communicate with yourself in this like, I'm on a honeymoon and this is so easy and great, but like, I care about myself and I'm willing to go through this so that now I don't have to struggle with this anymore. I can solve it and move on. So having said that, Lisa, because thank you so much. You're hitting this all at a really great and deep level. Um, kind of go take us through your journey with the points that you came up against, or some of the things you've discovered about yourself in this year.
Sure. Yeah. I definitely went through the honeymoon, and that lasted about 6 months. And I was able to release about, I'd say 20 to 25 pounds. And then, then the marriage started. And so I started kind of finding myself not being as consistent with using the skills, and my weight release sort of flattened out. It just wasn't trucking along like it had been.
Right.
But I think that I understand in retrospect how normal that was. I'm sure I freaked out. I think I've stopped freaking out about that, but I'm sure you've heard me freak out about it a few times in the
Sure.
last
And
year,
that's
but
totally normal.
sure. Yeah. And I think that, everybody, I've gotten to know a lot of the other members of the shift program, and I kind of realized like we all have a lot of things in common, but then we all have things that are just our own that we have to go through. And for me, I had to really address a pattern of emotional eating and numbing out, and without dragging your listeners through my emotional baggage, a lot of it had to do with like forgiving my mom,
Mm.
who, I had a tendency to want to blame her for my eating habits. And then, I think I just grew enough to a point where I was just like, you know, I'm an adult now. Like
Mhm.
I don't have to be a victim of that. And she never had the help that I'm getting now. I feel bad that she never did.
Yeah.
So I think I needed to develop more compassion, and less blame, and really take ownership of myself and my own behaviors and my own ability to address them. And so I
And
had to
that's
go
such a
through,
big part of it. It's like taking 100% responsibility is huge. I mean, that is
yeah,
really the bedrock of this.
sure, it absolutely is. And I think that it's just a relief too, because when you're blaming other people for things, in the moment it might make you feel better because you get to feel kind of helpless and poor me, but in the long run it really is disempowering, and it doesn't give you any kind of a solution. It's really just sort of it's kind of a thought limiting way to live.
Yeah.
It's
You
like,
get
well,
stuck.
you get very stuck. And so, I think that it really helped me to go through that process. I feel like my relationship with my mom has improved. So I'm really glad about that. I mean, my mom is wonderful. I've always really been very close with her, but I think it was just like one of these little grudges I might have had that I needed to let go of,
Yeah.
and understand like how hard her situation was, much harder than mine. And then I think I also, when I relocated, I think that I left some friendships in kind of an unfinished place, and that always bothered me. And so, and I didn't realize how much it bothered me, but actually I was digging through old photographs looking for a particular photo of me at the beach that I wanted to have to kind of help with my sort of vision of my goal. And in the process, I found like every photo from my past had this old friend. Like it was like there was just no batch of photos that I pulled out that she and I weren't in there together, and we had
Mm.
lost touch. And so I reconnected with her. I reconnected with another friend. I realized I didn't realize how much that stuff was bothering me because I moved
Right.
thousands of miles away. And so all of this seems so unrelated to weight loss, but for me, it was really those feelings would come up at a subconscious level. The hypnosis helped me be more aware of like that. Oh, you're running into the kitchen because you're feeling some pain about something.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to like pull it out and to actually do something about it after years. And so um, I don't know that everybody's journey is as emotional as mine has
Well,
been, but
no, but
maybe.
I think that when you really heal your relationship with food, like when you go on this journey, it's not just healing a relationship with food. You are healing yourself, because in order for you to keep continuing through, you're absolutely right. Like, how do you end emotional eating? You learn how to manage your emotions. It's
Mhm.
not like there's going to be a magic wand and in managing your emotions, you're managing yourself, right? So you had a little conversation with not a little, but many, you got curious. You said, oh, wow, that's really, I'm still hurt by this, or there's these feelings and they do come up. Let me take some action on this. And you did. And I think working with your inner coach in this way too, what it does when you're not always criticizing yourself and not always rebelling against yourself, what happens is you become a lot more self-loving, self-forgiving. And that allows you to take risks, like calling these people you hadn't called in years, and be okay about it. Like, I'm taking some action for me. You didn't know what the outcome would be, but you're because you had a loving coach on the other side of whatever action you took. You knew, like, no matter what happened, you weren't going to beat yourself up about it or shame yourself. You were going to go, wow, kid, you really went for that. You took care of yourself. You were reaching out to, heal something. Good for you. You know, so
Yeah, it's definitely, it's exactly as you describe it, that I realized that really I had nothing to lose, because it was causing me so much pain to think about these friendships and feel, regret and
yeah,
unsure about whether there was anything there, was there still a friendship there? Was there not? And so for me, it just was better to face it and move forward. And it worked out great. It's like you build things up in your mind sometimes to, like, oh, I'm a terrible person, but everybody's like, oh, it's so great to hear
yeah,
from you. I'm so glad we're connecting again. Like, it was fine,
yeah,
but I just didn't have the courage to do it before. And maybe I also just didn't realize. No, I think I was avoiding it. I mean, I think at some level I realized I needed to do it, but I was just avoiding it.
yeah,
And food was one of the ways that I would avoid it. So yeah, that was actually, and I didn't release a lot of weight while I was doing that. And I'm fine with it, because I realized, like, this is the long haul. This is
hmm,
like not an up and down the scale thing for me. This is like, if I need to pause and work on whatever it is that's in front of me that's preventing me from moving forward, then that's what I have to do. So,
yeah,
yeah. And it never ends. There's always things that come up in life that you have to
yeah.
take care of. So, that
But
I've really learned that through this process.
well, and what you're also learning is that you're also creating. So it's not just learning, but you're creating a way of living and communicating with yourself that ultimately is going to allow you to live your life at your ideal weight. And, you've released 40 pounds in a year, which is significant. I mean, when you think about how much that is, but what else you've released, what else you've changed about your life. I mean, I think we get so in the diet industry, so focuses on the outward stuff and not this journey that is just so, it is such a life affirming journey. Anybody who has long-term permanent weight mastery will say, yes, it's great to be at a lighter weight, but who I've had to become in order to maintain it is the value for me.
I completely agree. I would say I've gone through more personal growth in the last year than I had for probably, the 20 or 30 years before that, really.
Right.
It's, and
I believe it.
it's just one of those things too. I didn't understand it when I was first starting, and other people who are part of your program who were farther along would start to talk about some of these issues coming up for them. And I really didn't get it until I
Mhm.
went through it myself. So I would
Yes.
say, like, if this isn't resonating with somebody who's listening,
Mhm.
it might not be everybody's issue, but sometimes it is just something, once you experience it, you're like, oh, okay, now I know it. Now I know what they were talking about. I
Yeah.
didn't know that, but you don't know what you don't know. So,
Yeah.
I think just being open to that. This is more like, if you really want it to change, or if you really want to get to the point, like you're saying, where you are just maintaining the weight you want to be, and it is no longer this just constant drag in your life, that it's just something you start to do more automatically, and you can free yourself up for other things. um I think you have to put the work in to get there. It's just
Yeah.
not like, no, if it was easy, everybody would be thin.
Yes, exactly. And but I also think that the work itself is joyful work. It's painful and it's frustrating, but there's so much you get back from it that but I think, yeah, people give up easily. Yeah, get frustrated. But
Yeah, it takes determination, I think, and it takes
grit,
being willing to, yeah, it takes a certain amount of grit. But I agree with you. It's 100% worth doing.
Yeah.
But my dad has a saying. He says, what does he say? He says something like, anything worth doing is hard.
I love your dad.
I love my dad too. I have wonderful parents. Yeah. But sometimes I think about that. So, but you're right. It's not hard in a negative way. It
Yeah.
just takes,
It takes
you
more of
just gotta,
you than sometimes maybe people are willing to realize in the beginning. Oh, well, I'll eat less, exercise more. That
yeah,
sounds good to me.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
it's, or I'll eliminate carbohydrates completely from my diet. That sounds good to me. And then you have to, but you always come up against yourself, that wonderful saying, wherever you go, there you are. And, um, like geographical reasoning, people moving across, to a different country. Well, I'll be happy there. And it's like, oh, but here I am. So even, you lost 20 pounds or in that first 6 months, it's like, but here I am, I'm still here. And I think that's why some people get to their ideal weight, like quickly went on a diet and they're like, oh, holy crap. I thought I would be different when I'm here. I'm still me. And I still have the same problems, the same issues, the same problem. And then they just start gaining the weight again because, they were focused externally and not internally on the journey. So now,
yeah.
Lisa, I want to be mindful of your time. Um, I know you have a few more epiphanies that like you've gone through this year. Um, what are some other things that you wanted to touch upon, because what Lisa is really talking about are these phases to a weight mastery journey?
Sure. Yeah. So I kind of got through my big emotional thing last summer, and then was feeling really back on track. And then I realized that at some point I was really having a lot of problems with sleep. I wasn't sleeping well, and I identified that as one of the big challenges for me, because sleep deprivation makes you hungry and makes your
Yes.
willpower lower. And so I realized, like, I have to get my sleep under control. And
Right.
so one of the things that I looked at was, like a lot of people during COVID, I had developed kind of a habit of having a glass or two of wine after work. It wasn't an excessive amount, but it was frequent. And I, had read that alcohol can affect your sleep. And I think anybody who consumes alcohol is probably familiar with waking up in the middle of the night, kind of parched and just not sleeping well or not waking up too early. And so I decided I was going to see what it felt like to not have alcohol at all. And so I went, most people wait till January, but I decided to start it in December. So the month of December, I had no alcohol. It was, it's a little hard in the beginning when it's a habit, you're used to it, and then you have to stop. But basically I realized, like, that was a scary thing to give up. I think it is for a lot of people, even if you don't have an addiction, is like, it's just a comfort. It's like, oh, this is my last thing,
Yeah.
but it turned out to be such a good decision, because I realized then how much it was affecting my sleep. And if you get the sleep trackers, those are really interesting. The little apps where I
Mm.
use that, and I was like, oh, what do you know? I don't go into deep sleep if I've had a glass of wine before. I wake up, 8 times. And I just became a little more aware of how I felt, like waking up in the middle of the night and feeling just like mildly poisoned. Even 2 glasses of wine will make me feel that way. I would be hungrier the next day. And it just helped me realize, like, okay, this is a habit that's not serving me. And it's not a judgment about alcohol. I think, some people can't be around it at all. Some people can be around it and they're fine. For me, it's just needs to be an occasional thing.
Yeah.
So that was, and that was a big change, because it really and I think for women in particular, women are drinking a lot more alcohol than they ever have, and it affects our health more than it does men. So
For
it's a
sure.
serious thing to think about. I think the other big thing I did most recently, so I did alcohol, and then I'm on to my next thing, and that was to start to become more aware of what my own hunger patterns are, and to really rethink like the American meal plan, or even some of
Mm,
the diet suggestions, which are like you're constantly eating, that's like it's there's different
right.
rules people come up with, but one of them is like you have to be eating a snack every, so often. And so one of the things, Rita, you've done with our group, and it's always really funny because you've heard me talk about oatmeal a lot, is you've encouraged us a lot to learn to pay attention to what works for us and don't worry about what everybody else is doing.
Right.
Like just stay in your lane. And for me, I've had to just come to terms with the fact that like I love oatmeal, but oatmeal does not love me. And it doesn't matter what kind it is. It doesn't matter what I eat with it. It doesn't make it, it just, it throws my blood sugar way off and makes my life harder. And so it's just kind of funny every time I say that, somebody will say, "Oh, I have oatmeal with some berries and nuts and I'm full till lunch." And I'm like, "Yeah, not me." um, so I think that, part of the process is you got to figure out for yourself. It doesn't matter what anybody else does and what work. You might try what works for somebody else to see if it works for you. But if it doesn't, you just let that go, and you figure out what works for you. And so recently I started thinking about, I lived in Mexico for a while, and they eat very differently than we do. They might eat like, we would have like a real light breakfast when we got up with coffee, and then like mid-morning you would have a heavier meal, and then maybe a little light lunch, maybe not.
So in
And then
Mexico, you would it there the pattern was coffee, and then it was like more of a substantial meal like mid-morning, like 10, 11, 12. Interesting.
right.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. And then, lunch isn't quite so much a thing there. Maybe, I mean, they do snack a lot in Mexico, and this is not, I don't want to say that everybody there has a perfect, diet. There's the explosion of snack culture there is caused a lot of weight gain. But, sort of the more family eating pattern would be a larger meal, kind of mid to late morning. And then the main meal is in the afternoon, which is what people think is siesta. But it's like, I didn't know anybody who slept in the afternoon. It was really when everybody would take a break from work and sit down and have a meal, often with their family. And that was when you ate. Basically, what we would eat as dinner was maybe at 3 or 4 o'clock in the
Right.
afternoon. And then maybe in the evening, you would have something light to eat before bed. Or if you had a light afternoon meal, you might eat something a little more, but it was never like a big meal like we would eat in
Right.
in the US. And so I realized like I had just been fighting for so long. When I'm naturally hungry is mid to late morning and mid to late afternoon. That's when I have the hardest time avoiding snacking and tend to want to mindlessly eat. And I finally realized, like, it's like, well, that's when I'm hungry. So why not just stop the snacking and sit down and have an actual meal? And then I might not eat again the rest of the day, or I might have something light. But, maybe that doesn't maybe it works for somebody else who listens to this, and maybe it doesn't. But I think the idea is like, don't be bound to traditional patterns of eating or foods
Yeah.
that somebody tells you are good. You have to figure that out for yourself. And I'm still working out the details, like how to shop, because I'm used to sort of the 3 meals, not 2. And so I'm still kind of wrapping my head around like what to buy at the store and what to think of to eat at certain times. But the days that I do it, I will say I feel much better, and it's a lot easier to come in at the calorie budget that I wanted to have that day. So I think I'm learning a lot about being flexible through
Yeah.
this program, and to identify when something doesn't really work for me and think about doing it differently. Or if I plan to do something and that plan gets foiled, to not be so like, "Oh, well, I can't swim today because that pool's closed and I was going to go at that time." It's like, nope. Well, then go for a walk, or, like,
Right.
don't be rigid about my thinking. Yeah, that has helped me a lot.
I love that. And you are so right about the idea of flexibility in our thinking in so many different ways. You're right. Like so often we're just so hair triggered to go off our diet, or go off our exercise plan. Well, it didn't work out as plan A. And we were talking about that the other day, like plan
Mhm.
B, uh, always having a plan B. And I love what you talked about the food in Mexico and the eating patterns. I think I mentioned to you in a monthly mastery meeting, because we were talking about this. And it's fascinating how the human body, when we really tune into it, I think is much more on that Mexican eating pattern, like I'm not truly hungry really until like 10 in the morning.
Mhm.
My appetite hasn't woken up. And especially if I'm not eating, like I think a lot of us who are struggling with night snacking, we're eating refined carbohydrates at night. So we'll wake up hungry, or we might wake up full. I don't know. But um, eating the carbs or drinking even wine can make us wake up with that sort of fake hunger, which isn't naturally true. But yeah, like I think our true hunger is like around 10 or 11, and then that 3 or 4 time. And
Mhm.
yeah, but I agree with you. It might not work. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody should be doing that, but tuning in and going, oh, what maybe I don't need, because we get into these patterns of eating and then our body expects it, our brain expects it, and we feel that fake hunger, but we're not actually really hungry. So
Mhm.
it's such a great point. Um, how about how's your relationship with your inner coach evolved then through this process? I mean, I know we've basically been talking about that the entire time, but was there anything else, other points that you wanted to bring up?
I would just say that once you start to develop that voice in your head, like I kind of jokingly call it the adult in the room.
That's
And
great.
sometimes like the kids are drowning out the adult, but once you start to develop it and you keep working that muscle through hypnosis and meditation, I think it just there are just various ways you can do it. The shift breath that you recommend, there's all these little tricks you can use to reconnect to yourself. But um, I think that the difference is like you can't unlearn that, and you can't once you have that inner coach, the inner coach really doesn't go away. It just might be a little harder to hear sometimes, and so I'm learning to try to create the spaces for that voice to have the floor for me. Um, and then I think I would just say that this goes back to what we talked a little bit about earlier, but I would say the thing that I really realized was that when shift is going well for me and the weight's coming off and I'm on top of my game, it's really fun and I love those times and I need them and I enjoy them. But that is not where the ninja skills come from. It really has every single time for me come from getting off track and getting right back on track. It's come
Mm,
from, putting a few pounds back on and correcting that immediately rather than giving up. It's like having a bad day and intercepting that and saying, okay, well, so far the day's kind of not gone well, but that doesn't mean I have to keep going.
yeah.
What can I do now to finish my day in a little, in a way that I feel better about? And so, this is such a sticking point because we see all the time people as they start this process, they don't do it perfectly and they immediately want to start over. They feel frustrated and angry at themselves for not being perfect. And I would just encourage anybody who's interested in, following this is to just keep putting one foot in front of the other and take those opportunities when you make a mistake to learn from it and to think about what could you do a little differently next time, just the way you would learn anything else. Like you say, like a kid learning to ride a bike might fall and you don't say, well, you're never going to learn to ride a bike, or you have to go back to we're putting training wheels back on, like you just can't. You can kind of reset yourself, but you can't ever go back to the beginning again. Like
No.
I've even tried that and it's like, oh, I already know this. It's like you don't give
Yeah.
yourself enough credit for what you know. And
Yeah.
and I think that we feel like we have to start over because it's an old pattern, but really you just sometimes have to spend a little time reviewing things, but you don't ever go back to the beginning. You
Right.
just start again where you are. It's like if you were driving and you got lost on the highway, you took the wrong turn. If you were 300 miles away from home, would you go back home and start the trip again? Like, no,
Right.
you would find your way back to your
Right.
road,
Yes.
and then you would get going again, and you might get lost again, but you would, each time it gets a little bit easier to get yourself back on the right road, I would say. So it's just it's a different way of, approaching it. And I think it's in the long run is what you have to do, because otherwise you'll never be able to maintain it.
Yeah.
If you have to be perfect, like, I mean, we have people in the group at maintenance who have put some weight back on and then need to go back down. But at this point, I just look at the times now when I get off track and it happens as like, okay, well, this is kind of practice for maintenance. Like,
Yeah.
because this is going to be how it goes the rest of my life. There's always going to be something that comes up. And
Yeah.
so, I don't worry about off track quite so much now, because I realize,
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm just developing more skills about how to get back on track that I'm
Yes.
always going to need those. So
Yes. So well put, Lisa. I can't
thank you.
say that was a really great insight, because I do think practicing getting back on track is, again, another fundamental thing that we really have to be trained out of our perfectionism. And the more you do that, the better, the more you get back yourself on track. So yeah, I always say to people, I hope you make mistakes. I hope you gain some weight that you have to take back off again, because you'll get that confidence that you wouldn't have if it was just, again, all the way down the scale really quickly.
Oh, for sure.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. So in wrapping up, I just want to ask you, do you have any like words of encouragement for anybody who's just like starting to take that first step or thinking about taking that first step? Like, you know, yeah, anything from your way, thinking back to when you were taking that first step, or any, now a year later, 40 pounds lighter, and so much, as you can all hear, Lisa's journey, so much weight mastery, down the road. Yeah, just any words, other parting closing words.
I would say just stick with it, and sometimes you're going to have to just operate on faith. There are
Mm,
just going to be those times when maybe you don't believe in yourself as much, or you feel like you can't do it, or it's too hard, or whatever. But just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and have some patience with yourself. And this is really, especially if you have a lot of weight to release, this is really a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so um, you have to kind of train in that way.
yeah.
But it's so absolutely worth it. I'm not at goal, but I will just say, like, I didn't realize, like everybody else, I started with like this unrealistic expectation of like, I'm going to be at goal in 1 year, kind of, I'm going to release at this rate every single week at 52 weeks a year. And that's not how it worked for me. But I'm really at peace with it now. And I would say that what I didn't recognize in the beginning was that every 5 pounds you take off improves your quality of life and makes you feel better. And
Mm,
so even though I am not at goal, I feel so much better than I did a year ago. It's
yeah.
it's it's just night and day. And so it's worth it, even if it takes a little longer than you wanted. And it's just so worth doing. Just stick
Wow.
to it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I know you have to get going on your day, but I really value and appreciate you and the time you spent with some really amazing insights and courage and wisdom for our listeners. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Rita. I really could not have done it without you. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for your generous insights. And I hope you guys gleaned a lot from her honest and wonderful, generous sharing. So don't forget, join me on the 21st. Get into those show notes and sign up, because, like I said, space is getting very limited. It's a 75-minute masterclass. And it's really what I believe is going to be the starting place for your own amazing long-term journey. So come and join us. And otherwise, have an amazing week. And remember that the key, and probably the only key to unlocking the door of the weight struggle, is inside you. So keep listening and find it. Have an awesome week, you guys, and I will see you next week, or hopefully in the masterclass. Thanks for listening to the Thin Thinking Podcast. Did that episode go by way too fast for you? If so, and you want to dive deeper into the mindset of long-term weight release, head on over to www.shiftweightmastery.com. That's www.shiftweightmastery.com, where you'll find numerous tools and resources to help you unlock your mind for permanent weight release, tips, strategies, and more. And be sure to check the show notes to learn more about my book, From Fat to Thin Thinking, Unlock Your Mind for Permanent Weight Loss, and to learn how to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode.